Welcome to Crash Concepts, where the economy, energy, and the environment are explored. Up next, fresh ideas and insights into the factors that are driving the world and shaping your future. Presenting information you can't afford to live without, here's Chris Martenson.
Well, welcome. We're here in sunny Charleston, South Carolina, and it's just a beautiful place to be. And I have the great honor to sit here today, Francis Koster, and today we're going to be talking about, what we do in our work is we talk about the economy and energy and the intersection of the two. We think there's some incredible changes coming. Of course, it's one thing to point out those changes, it's quite another to talk about what you do in response to those changes. So I'm going to let Francis introduce himself, but today we're going to have an incredible discussion about solutions, about what we can actually do. There's the problem, and then there's the response. And so today I hope we're going to be able to focus on some just incredible responses that Francis has been working on for a while. So Francis, welcome.
Thank you.
And introduce yourself if you would.
My name is Francis Koster. My doctorate is from the Program for the Study of the Future at the University of Massachusetts, a program which I must say doesn't exist anymore. But 40 years or so ago when I was engaged in it, I paid particular attention to natural resource depletion issues, particularly oil, and the academic question of why leaders don't listen to warnings. And that's been a central issue of my career. My first career was as a university administrator. My second career was as a renewable energy administrator for both the university and electric utilities. And subsequent to that, after the oil prices fell, I became a pediatric healthcare administrator for a very large healthcare system. So throughout that time, my consciousness, my worldview, has paid attention not only to natural resources and what we might consider fundamental life support systems, but also the health and public health implications of the supply and the disruption of that supply.
So you've been at this for a number of years now, and you've mentioned to me yesterday that there are a number of areas that you look at and you see a number of concerns. And where have you focused most of your attention so far?
It is my perspective that we have a huge national problem that people have therefore imputed that we need a huge national solution to. And over time I've come to believe that the solution to the huge national problem is not national, but rather local. And that there are well-known and ample investment opportunities done at a smaller scale, which, when added up, yield more than we've been able to accomplish as a matter of national policy. So given paralysis in the political sphere for many controversial issues, I continue to look for a way to swim upstream and not be blocked by some polarizing polemic from one end of the continuum or the other. So I run a website called The Optimistic Futurist, and I collect examples of local success stories. And I have many more in my files than I have on the website, some of which I'll mention as we go along.
So the optimisticfuturist.com, is
Yes.
that right?
Thank you.
And so these are solutions that have been expressed at the community level where people are, I assume they're dealing with energy issues, food issues.
I tend to focus on the basic life support systems, food, energy, water, and the environment. But I also capture other issues. For example, there's a great passion in the United States at the moment about lowering taxes. If you take a look at the way taxes are spent, and you do not focus on national defense or the Social Security and Medicare programs, but look at everything else, particularly at the local level, you find out that public health is a huge consumer of dollars, the Medicaid program, the prison system, the correction systems, and the schools. And so and there are major opportunities to imitate successes that have been performed around the country to lower the operating costs in those areas. For example, some programs lower the recidivism rate of prisoners at the community jails from an industry norm of about 70% down to about 30%. It saves huge amounts of taxpayer dollars. As you know, it costs more to put someone in jail than it does to put them in college. Traffic roundabouts, for example, municipalities are responsible and land developers are responsible for four-way stop signs and traffic lights and so on and so forth. There has been a number of experiments done now and analysis done where if a local community substitutes roundabouts, such as are used in Europe, they reduce air pollution costs, they increase gas mileage, they increase throughput time from point A to point B, and it gets faster the more roundabouts you go through, and it reduces fuel consumption. And it, as a side effect, that catches drunk drivers, because the drunk driver tends to drive up into the middle of the thing and is easily retrieved by the local constabulary.
So if we put some auto-sized flypaper in the middle of the roundabout, this would be great.
So in some Midwestern states where the county operates the local hospital, and they put these roundabouts in, they've noticed a decline in public taxpayer support needed for the county hospital. So that's a local, replicable, good investment. And in the energy space, one of the major challenges is municipal buildings, schools, and so on and so forth, where there's either a lack of money to do energy conservation or renewable energy installation, or a perceived lack. And the perceived lack is frequently set by the willingness of the taxpayer to pony up. But it's a magnificent investment opportunity for private capital, because there are a wide range of favorable tax treatments for energy conservation and solar energy, which the private sector can harvest and the public sector cannot. So an investor might, for example, go to the local school system and say, I'll fix the following 9 buildings and I'll loan you the money, and you will pay it back to me out of a percentage of what you no longer pay the utility. And I also, by the way, get to keep the tax credits, which you can't use, and get quite handsome rates of return while doing good for their local community, looking good at the Rotary Club and so on. And these are enormously secure investments. I mean, you're not banking on a gold bubble or other volatile things. You're banking on the fact that energy prices are not going to go down.
Well, I really like what you're doing, because one of the most common refrains I hear from people is they say, okay, I get it. I'd really like to do good. I just don't know what to do with my money right now. So for a lot of people, doing something with their money, we're still constrained by traditional thinking. I'm either going to put it in stocks. I don't really feel good about stocks today for a variety of reasons, which can vary. But bonds, geez, 1%, tie my money up for 2 years? I don't know about that either. But you're saying there's third alternatives out there, but people don't know about them. And so you're trying to collect those.
There's 2 major categories of alternatives. First of all, let's talk about rate of return. Unless a building is brand new, there's typically the opportunity to save 20% of its energy bill at a 30% rate of return.
Wow.
Okay, 30% rate of return. If you want to go from 20% energy savings, there's a declining rate of return. The more you try and save in any given installation, the more your rate of return goes down, because you pick the low-hanging fruit and so on.
And that low-hanging fruit would be things like replacing windows, insulating.
The ballasts in fluorescent light bulbs, old air conditioning units. Many municipal schools were built in the 60s and 70s during the baby boom. They're now 40 years old. They still got the 40-year-old air conditioning in them. You could go along and go to your local Carrier air conditioner, or your local, pick a name, and I'm drawing a blank on other names. I didn't mean to favor Carrier, but go to a local HVAC place and say, what would it cost me to change the air conditioning out of, Herbert Hoover High School? And it would not be difficult to go to the school board and say, how much do you spend for energy, or go to the local school administration, and they'll tell you, and perform a little back-of-the-envelope calculation, and put your money there. And it's local, it creates local employment, it educates local kids, and you'll earn 20%, risk-free. using proven technology. We're not waiting for the latest new windmill, the latest new photovoltaic. We're taking off-the-shelf, well-established technology that your local craftsmen know how to fix and use.
Well, this is a big theme of ours, is that we do feel in some cases people are waiting for, when that final awesome technology comes, then, there's a big if-then statement in there. And for us, it feels like there's so much that we can do right now on the shelf. So I just installed solar panels, 70s technology, right? Nothing fancy about flowing water through a box.
Right.
It happens to be black, right? So there are things that are off the shelf right now. One of the biggest areas that we see where I think the earliest gain has to be is in conservation itself, right? Like, yes, we can use watts more efficiently, but the best thing is to actually not use a watt in the first place. Do you work with conservation? Is there a return play in conservation?
Absolutely.
And
when one thinks about this, let me say this. There is a palpable bias in the population of entrepreneurs who are drawn to this space. And the bias goes something like this. Major investors or venture capital firms are looking for in and out in a year and a half or 2 or 3 with a rate of return of 30, 40, 50, 60, 70%. So they're personalities who are drawn to highly leveraged risks, excitement, et cetera, et cetera. Then there are the techies who are engineers of one stripe or another who want to make the latest and greatest, something, windmill, solar panel, paint that converts to electricity, something. When you focus in energy conservation, it's really boring compared to that, unless you focus on the bottom line. And if you are relatively risk averse, you're much better off to pay for painting the local school building's roof white and take your 20% than you are talking to your brother-in-law about some guy in a garage who's building the latest gizmo. And we've failed as a society to link the conservative, and I say this a lot, the fiscally conservative investor with the local opportunities in a way that create local jobs. Partly, I think, because as youngsters come up out of school, they want to make the latest and greatest. I mean, that's how you were when you were that age. That's how I was. As we begin to build our retirement savings and so on and so forth, we're not quite as willing to put all the chips in the middle of the table anymore. And yet, in many cases, the desire to do good while doing well is still present. And so there are large numbers of opportunities to do that. I'll give you another example. In the state of North Carolina, where I currently live, only about half the landfills capture the methane gas that is generated from them. It's a huge financial opportunity. There are major companies that go around the country and take the very large landfills and do something with the methane gas. But locally, there's lots of nice, tidy $250,000 investments sitting there that the large companies will not do because their overhead is too high and so on and so forth. So one of my themes is look in your own backyard, focus on fiscally conservative, sound investments, and focus on local employment. And you will be surprised at the opportunity that just leaps out at you.
So you've been collecting some of these stories for a while, and,
Yes.
and you've stored them at your website, I assume, and,
Yes.
and people can search them there and look for them. How many of these stories do you have there right now?
I've only got 32 published. I've been going through a struggle of labeling. I used to call the website Designs for America because I wanted to create a blueprint for a new America. I didn't get any hits. So after a year of struggling with that, pushing that particular rope, I tried calling it the pessimistic futurist, and I even got less hits. So after doing some quiet thinking, it became clear that what I'm talking about is really a flavor of optimism within one's self-control. I'm not asking or suggesting that people buy stock in a large company and hope they solve it. I'm suggesting you go to your local credit union and you guys solve the local school problem with sound fiscal investment and so on and so forth. So I have 156 stories now, success stories, which I've captured. And I'm recruiting college students to help me write them from the journalism schools around the country. So that's where I'm putting my social capital.
Excellent. How's that recruiting going? If you need any more talent, I'm sure that some will come through this particular opportunity.
If anybody
is
interested, knows of local success stories, and the website has some criteria, they have to be locally implementable, academically documented. I don't put up anything that A, hasn't worked, and B, hasn't been proven to work by a third-party review.
So define academically documented before we go.
There's
to the rest
footnotes
of the
at the bottom. It'll say, if it says it saved X, show me the document. Show me your monthly utility bills before and after, or show me the loan documents, or something like that.
Okay. Yep.
It's rigorous stuff.
Good.
Locally documented. It must be a sound fiscal investment after startup phase. I don't want to raise a higher hurdle for this form of venture capital than any other form of venture capital, and there are enterprises which get started that lose money for a year or two. But if it endured and if it came out over time to be a positive investment, then I would publish that.
Okay. So if it meets those criteria, so one thing people could do who are listening to this is if they know anything that fits that bill, or maybe they could submit it to you and you could tell them if it fit those criteria or not. And then the other thing would be, you have a bunch of stories that need to be
researched and written up.
The raw form, they need to be converted into web publishable form. Okay. So tell me, of all of them that you've got, can you categorize them, or how do you categorize them, and what sort of buckets are they fitting into right now? Are they energy plays? Are they food, water?
Well, look, there are so many success stories out there that as a means of focusing my own attention, I've chosen to put primary energy into the basic life support systems: food, energy, water, and the environment.
But you've collected stories from all of those.
If they come across the transom, I'll publish them, but I don't particularly go looking for them. I mentioned the prison recidivism one. I actually uncovered that on the way to another story, and so I put it up. Let me mention one having to do with food that may be of interest. Your audience probably is unaware that during the Second World War, 45% of America's fruits and vegetables was produced in backyard gardens. 45%.
The Victory Gardens.
In the Victory Gardens. And there was a huge mobilization of the local population to plant Victory Gardens. Right now, we import somewhere between 17 and 20% of our fresh fruits and vegetables. We import it. We have large unemployment, particularly of a labor pool that's not going to find work in high-tech industry. They're not going to be computer programmers. But they can raise vegetables. So here we are buying vegetables, flying it in through airplanes, which cause environmental degradation and so on and so forth. So how did we get there? Well, how did we move from local food production? Again, I'll use North Carolina as an example. The average farm in North Carolina is something on the order of 25 or 30 acres, because Grandpa used to own 450, and he died, and his kids inherited 100 each, and then they died, and so now it's down to 25 acres each. You can't do commodity crop raising. You can't raise corn and soybeans and so forth at a commodity scale on 25 acres. You just can't do it. So now you have a city like Charlotte, which is in the top 50 markets of the United States, that imports a huge amount of its food when it's sitting right in the middle of some of the best farmland that we've got on the East Coast. How did we get there? Well, it turns out that one of the major issues is that farmers are terrible marketers. That's not their gift. So a fellow that I know, he's a fellow ex-Peace Corps volunteer, he put together a computer program that went to the major food-consuming restaurants of Charlotte that were upscale and said, what kind of unique foods would you like to serve your customers to enhance your clientele? And they said, if we could get, foot-long French beans or purple potatoes or things which you cannot buy at the local supermarket, we would pay twice market because of the value add, it's called value-added produce, that would lend to our food establishment. So this fellow went out and talked to all the farmers and said, would you be willing to grow purple sweet potatoes? Well, no. Why not? Well, I only know how to grow corn and soybeans and commodity foodstuffs. And second, I've never seen a purple sweet potato. And B, who would buy it? So he said, look, I'll tell you what. We'll get you started with a small plot. I'm going to put this on a computer system. We're going to introduce the restaurant owners. When you decide you're getting close to harvest, you announce that you're going to have so many crates of purple sweet potatoes, and you set the price. And we're going to run an eBay for food. And so the restaurants went on and said, gee, next week we're going to have purple sweet potatoes available. I'll take 4 crates. And the restaurant down the street said, I'll take 3, and so on and so forth. The system has evolved, so now both the restaurant and the farmer have barcodes. Okay? So the farmer harvests his sweet potatoes, applies the barcode, he wands it with the computer that he has. It goes to the central, essentially virtual farmers co-op, if you will. It's the latter-day incarnation of the old dairy farmer co-op, where they had a central cooler and they used to pick up buckets of, huge pails of milk. But it's done virtually now. And then the restaurants, they have their barcode. And so come harvest morning, the driver gets in and he's geo-mapped to go from supplier to supplier to supplier to supplier in restaurant. And if it turns out that there's a restaurant on the way, I just picked up 4 crates of purple sweet potatoes and I need to drop 2 over here, it immediately drops them. It routes him that way and so on and so forth. The private transportation sector, in some cases, taxi cab company do it on return trips from the airport. In some cases, it's small cartage firms and so on. And sometimes it's just a guy with a pickup truck who agreed to do this twice a week when he's not, being the football coach or something like that. So it links small producers to small consumers using the internet. And it has been a phenomenal success. And we can do this in every city in the United States. There's no reason why this can't be done. So, and the I don't have the latest numbers, but the value of the produce which has flowed through that has doubled every year since its inception, which was 4 years ago.
That's incredible. I belong to a CSA, Community Supported Agriculture, and so we have a once-a-week pickup, and my wife and I drive down, and 50 other cars are in the lot jamming it at that point in time. But if I had a place I could go and I could say, because their produce varies a little bit, and you get to do a little bit of selection, but if I could go online and say, this week I need arugula carrots, whatever I'm gonna select, and then that could actually show up so that we didn't have, they have 400 clients, this CSA we belong to, and that means 400 cars drive there once a week and drive away. And so when you look at
I know the small town you live in,
Yep.
there is a guy someplace with a pickup truck who, if he knew that on Thursdays, if he went to a central location, he loaded his pickup truck and he just used Google Maps or something and figured out, he'd be delighted. You'd be happy to pay him a couple bucks to drop that stuff off.
I'd be totally thrilled. It would save me a whole hour.
Okay, well, when we're done here, go to my website.
Yes.
Okay, and look up this particular food production scheme.
Right. That's a fantastic idea. So we're saving energy, and most importantly, we're connecting local resources, which is a big story. I mean,
you're saving energy. You're improving the diet because American commodity foods, and I'm talking fruits and vegetables that you buy at the local market, have been genetically selected, and I don't mean by gene manipulation. I mean
just
they have been bred for their ability to stay ripe appearing for long periods of time. They have not been bred for their high nutritional content. That has been sacrificed, and there's recent work out that documents that quite well. The nutritional value of fast-growing crops for trace mineral elements which we're learning are increasingly more important, is lower than it was in the 40s and 50s.
I've seen the data, both the macronutrients and the micronutrients
Yes.
just plummeting, like 25, 30, 40%.
And the reason for
less.
it is it takes a while for these plants to extract the nutrients from the soil. And so if you make a plant that grows quickly to harvest, it hasn't been in the ground long enough to suck up the good stuff. So when you buy the product, it's less of a product than you think it is, and it's less of a product than it was 20 or 30 years ago.
Right, and you have to buy from a farmer then who also replaces those micronutrients
In the soil.
right,
and so on.
because once you've pulled the boron out, it's gone.
It's gone.
Right,
And
unless somebody puts it back.
So, and there's certification programs and so forth that you can on the website that I was previously discussing, elect whether you wish to, for example, buy just organic stuff or just natural stuff, or and those are two terms of art. Those are actual federal categories of food. For your listeners may not know that, or commodity grown. I'm afraid I lost my train of thought here. I took a diversion into food nutrition degradation, and I should have been talking about local jobs, reduction in air pollution, higher quality food. And the last one, which I feel quite strongly about, is that you've increased the nation's security. If all of your basic life support systems flow through a relatively small number of nodes, and something happens to one of those nodes, or they get exploited by evil forces or a germ,
Natural forces.
a germ or a bug or something, you have two immediate responses. You get a large number of people either sick or hurt or something, and you increase the desire for government regulation. So if, for example, in this morning's paper there was an article about a food recall, and so now the FDA or somebody's going to go crawl all over that particular plant and try and figure out how that started, because it will contaminate the food 10 million people. If you live in Charlotte, and one of the locals, if you live in Charlotte and your local supermarkets got their food from that 10 million family stream, and it gets paused, you're in a world of hurt. But if it's widely diverse in its supply, if you shut one down, then the others survive. And this kind of thinking goes back to the Cold War days. There was a fellow named Herman Kahn who wrote a lot of books about the dangers of excessive centralization.
Well, cost effectiveness is a brilliant, wonderful thing, and we all love, cheap food, cheap clothes, all of that. But there's always a trade-off in life, and the cost effectiveness trades off against resilience, right? So if you're keeping a deeper inventory of something, so we've made that trade-off. We've gone probably too far down the cost efficiency side of this curve, and some people are saying, maybe including our listeners, are very sympathetic to the idea of let's take a little less cost efficiency and let's have some more resilience baked into this. A quick story: when oil got to $140 a barrel, gasoline, breached the $4 barrier in my area. What I found out a year and a half later was that town officials had met with the local giant food store people, and the giant food store people were saying, after the fact sort of reporting on this, and it came out that they said the food stores were this close, I'm holding my fingers real close together, were this close to not having trucks come in, because they had an independent trucker network, and the independent trucker's like, I cannot haul this for you and make any money, so they're like, I'm not taking the load. And they were looking at the loss of all kinds of stuff from California. The further away it was, the greater the chance that they were saying, we might have shortages, because we've contracted with a supply network that's out of our control, in essence, in some respect. That was just at $4 a gallon. What happens at $6?
Right.
What happens if we go to $10 a gallon? Well, I think it's pretty clear. You can say there'll be disruptions. We can't predict necessarily where they are, but if you have local growing and local food storage, and that means we have to find some way of warehousing or cold storing.
The warehouses
or
exist.
Something.
The warehouses exist. In fact, there's a number of them that are dormant because we used to have them, and then we moved to refrigerated trucking, and it was virtual warehousing. But I've been involved in looking at a couple of local projects, and I find landlords who say, "Come on in, we've got these coolers sitting here. We might need to upgrade the compressor." You mentioned fuel disruption. The disposal of waste in America is a huge cost. That cost often strikes the taxpayer because they have to maintain dumps and landfills and so on and so forth. At the same time, the taxpayer is buying bus fuel for the school buses. The waste, the organic waste from the school lunches can make the fuel for the school buses. And there are a number of programs around the country that are now starting to imitate one that I know of, which has been quite successful, where literally a fellow who ran the maintenance yard of a school system got interested in biofuel and observed just how much organic matter, plants and so on and so forth, were being thrown out by the school, and he wanted to fiddle around and see if he could learn how to make biodiesel. And he was able to do it. And then he got support, thankfully, from his superiors, and they scaled it up. And then a local factory approached them that was really struggling to stay alive, and this contributed many of the jobs for the local community, and said, we pay people to haul away waste oil from our food. This is a cookie company. Mm-hmm. We bake cookies, and we have a lot of leftover cookie oil. How can we work together here? So it transformed an operating expense of a for-profit company into a tax-deductible donation, okay? Mm-hmm. So their bottom line looked better. The school system got the oil and put it in the school buses after this bright school maintenance guy ran it through his machinery, which, by the way, he purchased surplus from the National Guard and also from a dairy farmer. It was nothing more than a big stainless steel tank like he used to see go down the road, and a little bit of other stuff. I don't mean to oversimplify this, but this is nothing that the local community college couldn't teach people how to do. And there are community colleges that do teach this stuff. So it's not, you don't need to hire PhDs to do this. So they began to burn the biodiesel, and it got a bad rap nationally in the school bus literature and other mass transit litter, because the school buses began to break down. Why did it begin to break down? Well, this guy went in and figured out that the biodiesel was actually removing crud that had built up in the diesel engines of the school buses and was causing wear in those engines, and it broke it down. It was essentially, the filters were getting full. And at first that was viewed as a problem. Oh my God, we've got to replace the filters. And then the mechanics said, what are you talking about? You're prolonging the life of these engines amazingly. So we'll put another $20 filter in this, we'll get another 100,000 miles out of this thing. And so we have to look at the life cycle costs of some of this stuff. So now this school bus fleet is using a blend. I think it's 90-10 or 80-20, but the percentage of biodiesel, they make themselves. Mm-hmm. And they've hired people to make it themselves. They provided local employment, saved the local, made a contribution towards the survival of a local employer. The air pollution has gone down considerably. Many people don't know this, but the air pollution burden on children who ride school buses is not a healthy thing. Mm-hmm. The rates of asthma of kids who ride school buses is higher than the rates of asthma of kids who don't. Mm-hmm. So you've saved asthma, days of absence in schools, and a lot of people don't know this either. A school system gets paid essentially per capita, which is how many kid attendance days were there. So if you have a child who's an asthmatic and is out of school a lot, once they pass some threshold, the school doesn't get paid. Mm-hmm. So there's an economic incentive to the principal to lower the air pollution so that they get paid. That takes me to another topic, which is the monetization of external cost. Normally, when one would think about the miles per gallon and the cost of diesel fuel for school buses, you would not think about the sickness that diesel fuel caused. Mm-hmm. you would only think about the price of the diesel fuel. And I make arguments fairly forcefully that you need to talk about the cost of the diesel fuel, which includes the missed days of school and the air pollution and the national dependency on nations that don't like us and so on and so forth. So this is a triple win here.
And you've got a number of wins like that on your website. So how does it work? So if somebody's interested, they come to your website and they'll be able to see, be able to sort of sift through, and they could find these. And then is your intent that they would then sort of download that, or
they're free to take it?
There's
no user fee, there's no charges, there's no advertising. There are some tabs up at the top that say, if you know of a success story, we'd like to post it.
Yep.
Here's the criteria. If you know of someone who wants to volunteer as a writer, please have them contact us and we'll send you the story leads. They can research it. If you're a student who wants community service or a university student who wants to do an internship, because of my degree, I can often work out an arrangement with a faculty member where I can mentor a student and they can earn some independent study credit. I know a couple of things. We have increasingly centralized our life support systems to the point where we have huge vulnerability. There will be oil supply disruption. If you Google piracy and oil, just Google that much, or your listeners should do this, and you will find an astonishing litany of oil tankers that have been deliberately targeted for theft and ransom. Okay. More recently, radicals out of Iran tried to shut down the Straits of Hormuz using speedboats and explosives, because if they sunk one or two ships in that area, then we would lose all oil flowing to the world through the Straits of Hormuz. Huge vulnerability. And something like that will happen. We've seen it in Nigeria, where we've seen the terrorists take on the oil drilling platforms. Now, the pirates or the militants actually laid siege to oil drilling platforms and blew up pipelines and so on and so forth. So one doesn't have to identify the actual threat to come to a logical conclusion that there is risk out there. And so one thing I know for sure is that there's risk out there. Another thing I know for sure is that the more you centralize things, the more risk you have. Another thing I know for sure is that people like to take care of their own and work in their own towns and communities and so on and so forth. And the last thing I know is that approximately a third of all energy consumed in the United States is simply poured down the drain. So if we focus on that third, I'm delighted that the venture capitalists and others are struggling to come up with new and greater stuff. But paint your school roof white, and you'll cut the energy bill amazingly. And let's not over-dramatize this stuff. But to the extent that we can redisperse sources of supply, like the food thing that I talked about, or like the roundabouts, or like the school buses, we will be a more secure nation by virtue of having more secure communities, and you'll make money doing it.
I just love the idea of that, and this is all the time we have for this today. It's just I really invite everybody out there listening to go and check out the website, look at some of these other success stories, and by the way, some people will do that, and what I really want is I want to hear how some of these success stories work. I would love to hear how people can implement these things, because this is exactly what we need. We need to build more resilience into our lives. It's time to take the responsibility for our own outcomes back into our own community hands. And guess what? If we can make money at it and we can employ local people while we're doing that, we can eat healthier food and breathe cleaner air, I don't see the downside to this at all. So theoptimisticfuturist.com, that's the site that you should go to if you want to find out more. I just think this is a fantastic idea. And Francis, I want to thank you for doing this, because this needs doing. We need a portal for solutions, and you're setting that up. So happy to support that. It's been a real pleasure talking to you and meeting you.
Thank you very much.
This concludes this podcast by Chris Martenson. To gain further insight into where things stand today and what might happen tomorrow, please visit chrismartenson.com. That's ChrisMartenson.com. tenson.com. Please join Chris Martenson next time to continue your journey toward awareness, understanding, and action.